I mean, construction continues to lead the charts negatively for the number of fatal incidents. It's not just the US problem, it's the case in Israel as well. It's the case in other markets. It's really a global thing. And, this is despite, think of all of the technology that we've put into so many areas of our lives and how other areas are much improved. Think of a car, right? And how you're able to now control so many aspects of your car to really avoid an accident. It is a lot different than a construction site, but still.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Buildings 2.0. Today I'm speaking with Dana Kfir, Director, Customer Success and Operations at Otoos. Dana, thanks for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit more about your journey. So before you were an executive at Otoos and working with construction and technology, you started in construction and engineering.
Right. So, I used to say that I have a bit of an unorthodox career path, but I think as the more stories I hear, there isn't really a plan or kind of a path. So everybody's story is different. I actually started my career path in the army. So I started in the Israeli Defense Force, grew up in Israel my whole life. And when I was 18, I received a scholarship to go to get my undergrad in civil engineering. I come from a family of builders. My dad was, in construction, some other folks in the family. And, up until that point, if I knew anything, I knew that I did not want to pursue a career in that field. And so that kind of shuffled things for me. I took that opportunity and into kind of my education. I think it was kind of between year 1 or 2, everything kind of fell into place. Civil engineering is something you can feel really soon as you kind of dive into the construction piece of it. And so I really liked that piece of it's very tangible. You can see it everywhere. I had another conversation topic with my dad. So that was kind of a new thing that I liked. And so I completed my undergrad and I moved right into my officer's academy training, which was a part of the army training of that. And so I started as an officer and a project manager in the IDF, was 22, so relatively young. And those years really shaped who I am and how I do things. We like to say that, we work in a high-paced environment. So that was a high-paced environment for sure. I was thrown into the water. I had a lot of responsibility. I had a lot of challenge. And especially as a young engineer, it's a lot to take in and learn because you are straight out of school and you have to learn the practices of engineering, right? And how you build things and how you manage projects and so on. Most of the people I worked with and oftentimes managed, like construction teams or designers, were older than me, more experienced than me. And then I was the one in charge. I was the one representing the army. I was the one there and kind of making the decisions. And so it gave me that confidence and it gave me kind of maybe forced me to learn really quickly. As the years went by, I managed more complex projects. And again, for a young engineer, I got to touch various types of projects. So I did energy projects, I did infrastructure projects, I even did a project that was kind of an overall for sewer systems to bring them up to environmental codes, all kinds of projects. It was a great school for me. I did my master's through my army years in construction management. And actually, one of my kind of peaks of that was I did a research on safety by design. So really tying nicely into what I do today at Otoos. And the research was around the question of whether design professionals are aware, are they considering the risks they're putting workers when they're designing a new building and a facility with this kind of unique detail maybe, right? And are you putting in place things that could mitigate some of those risks? So that was kind of an interesting research on its own. And so I ended up staying in the Army for almost 8 years, completed my service as a major. And then the next stop for my husband and I was to come to New York City, which was kind of the natural move. We're approaching year 10 out of 2 is kind of our joke in the house. We built a life here. We had our 3 children here. And so, going back to the first days in the US, I used a couple of first months here to just do discovery, get to know the industry, meet with people, making connections. And I ended up starting to work at a heavy civil construction group here in New Jersey. A new chapter of my career was my first job out of the Army, my first job in the United States. And I ended up staying there for almost 6 years with the same core team. I was really lucky to have a great manager. She really gave me a lot of growth opportunities and leadership opportunities within the company. And we worked on a really cool project that was a greenfield port in the Republic of Georgia. So, an international project, traveled a bunch, had really unique engineering, it was marine engineering, a new field that I did not know before. So that was great. And then my manager spun out and started her own business of a construction management team. I continued with her, again, kind of stayed with the same core team for roughly 6 years. And then COVID happened. I was on maternity leave that was robbed from me. And, I was thinking of making a change. And I guess that pause kind of made me actually take the step. And so I wanted to transition into the tech space. I worked 1 year with a company that did real estate prop tech and managed operations there, and closing 2 years now at Otoos in the space of construction and technology where, I realized I want to be.
Super exciting. So much to dive into. I think between your move from the Army to New York to engineering and now into technologies, a lot to unpack there. I'm curious, your experience in the Army versus what you're doing today in the business world. Are there any takeaways? Are there any kind of recurring threads that from that jump that you still hold on to today?
There isn't anything that I do now that I think the foundations for it weren't laid during my Army days. I think a lot of who I am is due to those days. If there are similarities, and I think this would kind of sound very intuitive and natural, is the communication piece. As someone working in the Army, right, you have different folks you are communicating with, and it's almost different languages at times, right? If you're now reporting to a general, I would speak a very specific language. And if I'm talking to the field team building the project I'm managing, or the construction management team, or the designer, the architect, right, that all of those communication nuances were something that I kind of took in when I was really young. I had a lot of mentors in my Army days. And so really kind of was a sponge around them to see how they navigate through those different communication styles. And I think it's still something that is something that I continue to work on today, but it's very present in what we do, definitely in the construction tech space.
You mentioned your study on construction safety and how this is now informing the work you do today. As an architect, I shamefully, one of the perhaps least or last things that I think about is, as I'm designing and putting lines on a piece of paper or on a computer, is how that's actually going to get built. What have you found in your study and work in construction safety that's just not being considered when architects and engineers start a new project?
I mean, not to dive into specific details of construction, we basically saw exactly what you're describing, right? We met with a bunch of builders and architects and structural engineers, and we brought them to tour kind of a 3D model of a building that was constructed. And, they were almost kind of indifferent to things that were a risk for workers, all the while kind of keeping the goal of, we want this building to look like this. I want a 3 stories high lobby. I want it to look like this, how it's being constructed, how those lighting details are being installed. How are you going to maintain that? Right? All of these things were not really a part of the conversation. So I think, the research was more than 10 years ago. And I think the goal was to kick off the conversation, but really to just communicate to the industry that we operate within these kind of clear lines of siloed. You do your design, you put it out to bid, and then you start construction. Really, we should be having a lot of these conversations earlier on so that you bring the builder into where you're designing the space so that they weigh in on how it's going to be constructed. Not only will this be effective for safety, right, and the worker safety, but also for efficiency and for constructability of the building. You'll be able to do it just a lot faster.
Where are we today versus where do we need to be tomorrow in construction safety? So just, I don't know if there's maybe a benchmark or numbers that we can latch onto, but for the average layman, what's going on in construction today that just needs to end?
I mean, construction continues to lead the charts negatively for the number of fatal incidents. It's not just the US problem. It's the case in Israel as well. It's the case in other markets. It's really a global thing. And, this is despite, think of all of the technology that we've put into so many areas of our lives and how other areas are much improved. Think of a car, right? And how you're able to now control so many aspects of your car to really avoid an accident. It is a lot different than a construction site, but still, we have a lot of technology and a lot of means into advancing how we do things, but still those metrics are kind of where they were. And so I really think that we should kind of rethink that and how we do things to move us to the right direction.
I imagine on a day to day within a single construction project, there's so many different stakeholders, from the owners to the designers to the builders to all the service providers and technology that makes it possible. Who do you find is the largest advocate for construction safety? I mean, or rather, maybe asked differently, is who needs to be the largest, the biggest advocate for making sure that it's done correctly?
I think it should run through, you know, every layer of the company. But I think if management and leadership are not the biggest advocates and they're not in it, it won't be prioritized and it won't happen. Oftentimes because it requires to allocate budgets and so on. But it's also resources of the organization. It's your attention. It's what you speak to your team about when you're out in the field, right? Are you asking them how they're doing in terms of safety, or it's just something that, you're just satisfying the box and compliance and that's it. So I really think that, if you asked our site safety managers with our clients, safety is a huge priority for them. But if it's not coming from the top, I think you'll find that those would be organizations that are less performing well.
One of the things I've found is, I don't know if this is a cliche or a trope, or if this is just simply no longer true, but I've heard a lot of prop tech executives talk about how, on the site, you have a construction superintendent or folks on the site, and the last thing they want to be doing is kind of looking at an iPad or on their phone. Like, it's typically kind of a traditional space. How do you reconcile between empowering them with new technologies versus just the kind of the legacy mindset of like, this is how I've been doing it, so we'll continue to figure it out? How do you reconcile these two things?
Sure. I think, kind of touching a little bit of how we approach implementation, but really at the most basic level, no one likes change. We see that even when we are kind of introducing what we do to companies that already use and utilize technology, right? And even companies that have a very robust system to managing their processes, and they would say, we have a system, it's working, we do not want to change it. And I think a lot of times it's we don't want to change it and kind of get acclimated to something new. And then in other cases, it is the challenges of using technology, of using maybe another platform in addition to other tools that the company is already using for other purposes. I think the approach, and really this is kind of how we approach implementation and everything that we engage with our clients, is I could tell you the story of like how we tailor the implementation plan and the training and everything is kind of for this client. But really, really, the reality is it has to be bottom up. You have to be in the field. You have to, if you think you're going to kind of satisfy this with a bunch of tutorials and just sending a bunch of self-service resources, it's just not going to work, because it might work with some, right? It might work with some, but I think more often you'll find that you have to be there on site. You have to be in the foreman's meeting. You have to see where they are stuck with going through the flow you're training them to do. If something is off, maybe it's something we can improve in our platform, right? So really kind of being there and seeing what they struggle with is huge for us. And we've learned so much just by doing that. And the other piece of that is, if you won't get the managers involved to endorse and at times enforce using this, it also won't. So I think it's that struggle between being on site, not struggle, but balance rather, to kind of keep very close connection to the field and also, get the managers buy-in and involvement.
Talk to me about the technology itself. So what you're working at Otoos, your team is very much both on the ground, working with the construction teams, as well as building some incredible technology. I mean, what's changing and how are you guys approaching that?
Like you said, a good time to explain what it is that we do. So Otoos is a data-driven accident prevention platform, and we enable organizations to actively manage and mitigate risk. And that applies to, the corporate level all the way to the field and project level. And the platform is built with modules. You could kind of deploy the entire suite of solutions, or you can select modules that fit your organization, anywhere from worker compliance and managing everything relating to certifications and trainings, to access control with face recognition technology and really a turnkey solution that we offer, to safety management, where you would keep all of your inspections and checklists and observations and safety meetings. So really everything relating to safety and customizable for the client's needs. Equipment, where we really see that as a piece that should be treated like a person, right? It has its ID, it has kind of routines it has to go through, it has things that are kind of inspections that should be done periodically and so on. Our platform also allows you to communicate with your subs, and this is huge. Also allowing you to kind of pass the risk and responsibility to delegate some of those responsibilities to your sub, but also close the loop and make sure things are happening, right? So when you're onboarded to Otoos, your subs also get access to the platform, and they're able to communicate with you on all of these things. And lastly, one of our key features is called Sling, and it's basically a technology that picks up on your leading indicators and would basically allow you to compare your performance. So an organization would set criteria for how they want to measure their safety in all of their projects in a given market. And then you'll get this push report that allows you to understand how your performance is doing, to quantify it, and to drill down and identify any gaps, and then obviously feed it back to your safety protocols, right? So, if I think of an impact or a change we're bringing to how things are done traditionally, I would say that data is really a key component in that, right? Even from the level of the field, site safety managers, our foremans that are using the app have access to data that highlights for them, okay, what is the hottest item I should take care of? What risks do I have right now that are open? Maybe it's a deficiency, a safety deficiency I need to rectify. Maybe it's a compliance risk that puts me open to violations. So, you're able to make an informed decision that puts you in the right place, right, in the right time, but then frees you to run your job knowing that you are keeping all of those other risks in check.
From your experience, what are some of the must-haves when running a job site? Like, are there perhaps key performance indicators that, like, whether it's, across 2 or 3 different job sites, what are some of those data points? Just to drill in a little bit, what are some of those data points that everyone should be tracking?
The metrics that we kind of go to with a bunch of our clients have to do with, first of all, compliance, making sure that all of the personnel on site are kept in compliance, and that you don't have any instances of unauthorized people coming into the site, because that's a big exposure. The other level is all of your inspections, and the system does allow you to time all the inspections and associate them with someone who's responsible to perform them. And this is across the board for inspections by the GC, by your subs, inspections pertaining to equipment, anything like that will tie in, and you will measure if those are done, in time and, in the right quality. And then as far as safety observations and safety deficiencies, right, in that area, we measure a few metrics, right? We want to see a transparent and collaborative environment. So you want to see more and more reporting. You want to see people kind of see something, say something kind of vibe, right? But you also want to see that those are being closed on time. And you can also kind of look at subcontractor performance and tie it into how they're doing in terms of their safety performance. And then you can drill down and see what risk categories I have that are keep coming back on my sites. Is it fall protection that I see over and over again? Is it leading edge? Is it something relating to electrical? Is it trip hazards, fire protection? So many things that can happen, and you can go in and identify what are those risk categories that I see over and over again on a given site, and how can I change that, right? So, those would be some of the things we would focus on.
To role play a little bit. So I am a commercial developer. I've just bought a building and I'm about to renovate this building. Now, I know safety is something I should consider, but I don't know exactly who or what to do first. So first thing is, maybe I'll go to an architect, I'll hire them, and then start this conversation. If I'm a commercial developer and I know that I'm about to embark in, say, a large building scale renovation of an existing building, how can I think about safety proactively? For example, I hire a team like Otoos to come and help me early on? Do I actually need my architects or engineers or contractors actually to get on first? How should I think about this as an owner?
That's an excellent question. I think, as an owner specifically, I would definitely kind of set the tone with the design team, the construction team, that this is a priority. And I would put everyone around one table to kind of understand how do we define a successful outcome of this project in terms of safety, right? Maybe it's no incidents. Maybe it's all safety observations closed in time. Maybe it's 100% of orientations kind of keeping in check, right? There's many, many metrics out there that you could go. Some of them are kind of sticking to compliance, and some of them are taking it to a higher level if you wanted to kind of go above. And then I would kind of bring everyone, get the buy-in, and, developer will need to understand that if this means you have to put a full-time site safety manager on site, even if you're not mandated to, you should have someone kind of looking at that and being minded to the safety aspect. And I would say a system it doesn't have to be Otoos, although we would love to work with any developer, a system that helps you make that data accessible, makes it a lot easier, right? The traditional way of how things work are focused on binders and binders of documentation. And so in real time, it's extremely savvy to kind of sift through all of that and make sure you've set aside all of the requirements, right? And it's very time consuming as it is. And then even after the fact, after the project completes, you have all the documentation saved in the cloud. God forbid, if something happens, if you do get a claim, you're able to then go back and negate that and have all the records to kind of pull and use that, right?
With the emergence of AI, does that change, make things better? What is the impact of AI, like in your personal work and the work you're doing at Otoos?
I think AI, you can't really have a podcast on technology without saying AI, right? So we check the box. But I'm no expert of this technology. I think it'll bring many new capabilities to our space. We are able to deploy more features just by using AI to kind of help us improve our code, improve our performance and efficiency internally, right? And we're also leveraging that to kind of train models and to use them to identify risks on site using cameras, right? So that's something that is huge and we haven't seen so much of before. We see cameras being used for identification of quality issues, sometimes tracking people, but to really pick up on you're wearing your PPE or you're close to a leading edge or things like that, or I see smoke, right? Things like that could kind of feed back into real-time decision-making. I think that would be the huge thing for AI, is to really take all the vast data we're sitting on when we're in construction and making sense out of it. And at the end of it, making it accessible to the people who make decisions in real time.
I'm curious, to take a step back, for a young Dana, what would you tell a young Dana coming out of, from the Army in engineering, based off the experience you've had now across multiple projects, building different companies? What would you tell a young Dana?
Yeah, you know what? First of all, I'm going to tell her you're going to back to South America when you're 25. You're going to meet a guy, marry him. And I did. So that's great. And then I think for years I was, to go back to the decision to go down the path of engineering, I wasn't sure that I made the right choice, right? I liked construction, but I always had this voice in the back of my head saying, should I have, studied something different, economics or just something else? And, I would definitely whisper in my ear back then, you are in the right place, right? I think construction is great. I think construction is great also for women. There's room here for really everyone. I think a lot is happening too. Like the industry is ways to go in terms of innovation and incorporating new technologies. And even if you're doing kind of traditional construction with new methods and kind of new projects that are coming out, I think it's a really exciting space to be in.
This has been incredible. I think there's always so many subjects we could dive into, from the technology itself, the industry itself, in your own personal background. We definitely have to do a part two. For folks that want to follow your work and follow Otoos, where's the best place they can, get connected?
Yeah, I would definitely refer you to our LinkedIn page and our website. So that's kind of where everything's happening for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna. This has been super fun.
Thank you.